Can I ask you a quick question, Pam?
Yes.
Well, I don't think, remember that you had talked to us about when we check hours, the hours remaining on insurances?
Yes.
Like,
BCBA?
yeah, like, oh, we're going to change anyways now, so it doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm. No, but, well, let me know. I can help you during this season.
Yeah, because I know that I could check it, let's say, like, before we render, down on the bottom, that little drop down, but I feel like sometimes that's not, it doesn't always give you the most, all of the information.
Okay, so then let me kind of show you and share screen. Wait, hold on. Let me actually log on to WebABA first. That'd be good. And then I'll.
Oh, Pam, like the new system, do you know, like, have you experienced the system before, or it's like also new for
no,
you?
This will be a new one for me. I have made lots of fun friends through conferences, and I have lots, like a pretty broad network. So I will know someone that knows someone that knows how to use it, or maybe who even knows the company. So just bear with me, and I will make sure that, hold on, let me get on WebABA, and then I'll get you guys on it. No one please judge me about the number of pages I have open on my one screen. I have like 100 windows open constantly.
I was already doing that.
Yeah, I just have like ADHD in my brain and on my computer. All right, so then you want to kind of take a peek here. It depends the insurance. I'm gonna pause the recording to make sure we maintain confidentiality. So I'll show you how to do it, and then we'll resume. Yes, so your pay rate is going to be based on a couple different things. So the way that every company, so not PBS, calculates a rate is, at the end of the day, most of the ABA companies I know are not nonprofit. I don't know of any off the top of my head that is a clinic that's nonprofit, unless they're a state-run agency, which really occurs more up north, not really down in Florida. So I'm gonna just speak to the breadth of my experience, which is like in a couple different states, but not like every single state in the United States. So if this works different in California, I don't know, because I've never practiced in California. But if you are working for a for-profit company, which is more likely you are to do, they make an insurance contract with a provider. So ring-a-ding-ding, PBS calls United, and United gives a specific billable rate to be in network with PBS. What does that mean? For every hour you bill an RBT, for example, they will pay you $25. They will pay the company $25. For every BCBA hour, they will pay the company $100. I'm just giving you an example. I don't know if these are the exact rates. Based on that, the company makes a kind of decision. What do we need to keep in order for us to run this business and do it in a way that's, Lord willing, ethical and best? And then what do we need, out of that, our keep money, and then what is our payout money, right? So then if, let's say, for every hour of rendered service, United pays $25, it doesn't matter if the case is more difficult, less difficult, it's purely a numbers game. So if one client is billing 30 hours of, hold on, I'm gonna take out my calculator because I can't do this off the top of my head. 30 hours for $25, and then you're billing 6 hours a week, for example, at $100, that's $500. That's a total $1,250 that the company's bringing in money. Now, they have to pay the employee, and they also have to pay, they have to pay the RBT, and they also have to pay the BCBA. If they paid everything, there's no point of this company existing, because they're not there to make money. So you have to kind of find a magic rate. There's a way to calculate this, but then this is going to be a conversation y'all can have with Maria or Luke or business people. It's above my pay grade again. That there's kind of like a nice sweet spot of where you're going to find qualified great employees to pay, but you're still going to have viability as a company. So based on that, you have to calculate your risk in terms of employees versus 1099s. There's a couple benefits for the company in terms of keeping some people 1099 versus employees. Just so you guys are aware, when you have an employee, you are by law required to pay for compensation insurance, to pay for, I think 50% of their taxes. If we had state taxes, for example, which Florida doesn't, also part of state taxes, liability, et cetera, benefits. Like, you know, by the way, people think benefits, like benefits are not free. The company is housing, you know, some of the costs. So they calculate that into your compensation rate. So sometimes when you look at the numbers, it's not always even. I'll give you a perfect example. One of my very best friends works for the city of Miramar, and like she's like the head engineer for the city. Generally, government positions will pay you less of salary, but your benefits are like amazing. Like she has like a pension that she'll have. If she works for 10 years, she'll get 40% of her pay the rest of her life. She will have, I mean, basically she told me she pays like less than $100 for health insurance. If you try to buy health insurance privately, I promise you, even if you're a healthy person, you're going to pay into the 400s or 500s. That's just the way it is. So the government will make up for the lower salary in the benefits, so that they're paying almost the same if you think about the cost, but it's in different areas. So if you look solely at, like, let's say, what's the hourly rate of an employee BCBA versus a 1099, they're going to look dramatically different. But you also, people, what they fail to understand is what is your taxable rate, what is the amount that you're using or accessing benefits, what is the company paying out for your liability, compensation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So those are a couple things to consider when you're kind of trying to decide, do I stay 1099 versus a W2? So an employee would be a W2, 1099 would be a contractor. There's pros and cons to both. And now I'm going to speak to it on kind of the BCBA side. So on the BCBA side, if you have a 1099, you are more than likely going to make a higher hourly rate for billable hours. That's calculated solely on billable hours. So if you work 10 hours, you get paid for 10 hours. If you work 45 hours, you get paid 45 hours. It's up to you in terms of what, did Jessica get kicked out? That's odd. It's only up to you guys, kind of what you work at your pace. And generally that also means you take time off as much as you want, but it's unpaid. So if you don't work, as long you have the ethical responsibility, of course, as an analyst, to make sure your cases are overseen, well tended. But if you want to take 6 weeks off a year and you're able to do that in an ethical manner, you take 6 weeks off a year. You just have to calculate that they're not paid. Now, the benefit I would find of a 1099 is if you're a highly organized and structured person and are okay with living with a variable income, I would probably tell you a 1099 is better. But you also have to assume the risk, and the con is you are not going to have access to a company-sponsored health insurance plan. You are more than likely responsible for your costs for CEUs. Now, PBS has been pretty generous to their contractors that, like, they help sponsor half of our conferences, but that's not always the case with every other company. But you have to kind of assume I'm going to be responsible for my taxes. I'm going to be responsible for my health insurance. I'm going to be responsible for my liability insurance. I'm going to be responsible for any costs that I need to kind of assume in terms of materials for myself. Like, there is no company that will pay your VV-MAP, your ABLES. Like, you need to do that if you're a 1099. So you need to come in and assume like that. Also, if you get sick, there's no PTO. There's no, I mean, obviously you could, Lord willing, take the day, please. Like, don't spread germs around. But if you get sick, you don't get paid that day. So then you kind of assume that risk for a higher hourly rate. I would tell you at the moment, the industry rate for a 1099 BCBA is going somewhere between, and let me just say this, there are companies that do advertise a very high BCBA rate. Be mindful of that, because it is very weird to me how an insurance can pay you, for example, $100 an hour. And how are you as a company going to advertise $105 an hour for a BCBA? That's just mathematically impossible. So generally, when I would see that, I'm like, ding, 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 fraud. Like, that's the first thing that comes to my head. It's either the company's committing fraud, or theory number 2 is they're basically taking all of their RBT hours to the bank, which means an RBT works 30 hours for $10 an hour. Do you know the quality of an RBT you're going to get when you pay them $10 an hour? Not a great one. Because no one in their God's good earth is going to work, doing that type of job for such minimal pay. When minimum wage, I think right now is like $8.75. So be very mindful of that. So I kind of caution people, because the thing is, remember, we work as a team. If we don't have good RBTs, that makes our job more complicated. I want to have, and one of kind of the reasons I left my first company was because of that. We had great RBTs, we would invest in them, but they weren't really kind of getting paid what they should be getting paid. So we would like training really awesome people and they would leave. So then every 5 minutes I had to retrain a new RBT. And you know how annoying that is for me as an analyst, like for the client that's instability, like it was just a lose-lose all around. So you want to make sure you build a stable team starting with the foundation. Generally, you're also responsible for doing all the paperwork yourself. So what does that mean? If you are, well, you would also do that if you're salaried, but it would be part of your time working. But like, let's say I have to make a United call. That's not billable. I have to do that on my own time to make sure my client has services, and that there is going to be a lot of non-billable work you will have as an analyst. Just get over it. That's the way it is. There are times where you're gonna have to call and be on the phone with a parent, and it's not necessarily billable. There's times where you're gonna have to cut up 65 little pieces of paper and put nice little Velcros on them. Lord willing, you get nice families that wanna like help you cut paper. That's not billable. Yeah. There's times where you're gonna have to talk to an RBT because she's having a breakdown. That's not billable. So you're gonna get that non-billable work whether you're salaried or not. And I think that that's what some people don't like compensate or understand. So that's something to consider when you're a 1099. Now, pros and cons of a salary is you have a stable income, which for some people, depending their season of life, is good. You have access to benefits. Your taxes don't tend to be so complicated because they're already taken out from your check. And you generally have a certain amount that you need to, the way it works for a BCBA is you're going to have a minimum base for billable hours. It can be anywhere from, usually I see it between 20 and 30 hours a week. So you're responsible for working 20 to 30 billable hours every week, but you have PTO, you have kind of the nice benefits of that side. The con of working a salary is most people don't work 40 hours a week when you have a salary position. You could work 50 or 60 hours a week and there's no compensation for more work or less work. So that's kind of the difficulty of it. What else? You tend to have a bit more of a rigid schedule work-wise, you know what I mean? Which is kind of a hard thing because I feel like when you have a little, I don't know, well, pre-Rona life, the time of high work would always be afternoons for BCBAs. The mornings, sometimes if you had little clients, but you really, really worked your heaviest times in the afternoons. Post-Rona, I don't know what life looks like, so I can't tell. But if you work in a clinical setting, for example, it might be a little bit easier because you can, clock in, clock out in a place 9 to 5, and that kind of gives people some more stability. So they do like that. I have tended to see a lot of my colleagues shift into a salary position when they have children or when they're starting out. That's kind of like the season of people I see. Or if they're directors, like they do non-clinical work. Those are like the 3 people I see in those positions, generally. And why, and in those seasons. Because obviously if you have a child, you can't be, staying at somebody's house at 7:30 at night. And then coming, I mean, you can, but then who's going to take care of your kid and who's going to put him to bed? Like, or now the complication and something nice that Cultivate offers is they offer childcare benefits because if you're an analyst, like the heavy time now is in the morning. Well, if you have a child who's in school, who's teaching your kid? It has to be you or someone has to be responsible for that. So those are kind of some pros and cons to that. Does anybody have any questions up to now?
Did you mention the going rate?
Oh, no, I did not. Okay, so I would tell you somewhere, the low end I've seen offered is like $50 an hour to the high end I've seen $70 an hour. Now, that rate is based on a couple different things. What is your billable potential? What is your work ethic? Are you a seasoned or unseasoned analyst? right? Like if you're straight off the bat and you're like, I'm asking for 70, and be like, girl, I don't even know how much you can produce. Like what kind of, you think so, but you would think that it doesn't matter the type of client you take on, but there's also other things that you guys have to understand when you're negotiating with a company that they're going to see, right? What type of analyst are you in terms of what is your client caseload? Have you accepted or negated cases? How are those cases doing? What's the report back from your RBTs? But it really is based on like, are you a good producer for this company to deserve that rate, right? So then based on that, you should always and forever, I'm going to advocate for every woman on earth ever to negotiate your rate. You should negotiate every job you ever work at, period, end of story. Right? Like, don't go in because someone's like, oh, here's $10. Like, no, negotiate and, you know, advocate for yourself. Now, please don't go advocating above your level and your station, because then you just look like an idiot. And I've seen people do it and it's sort of funny. Like I've had like an RBT come off the boat and it's like, I deserve $25 an hour. Really, girl? You've never had a case in your life. Like, you want $25 an hour. Like, you need to kind of stay in your lane and understand and advocate what your position is. So that means do your research, understand if you're an experienced. So what's considered an experienced or non-experienced analyst is based on the amount of years you've been an analyst. So a junior analyst is considered anyone who's worked under 5 years. A senior analyst is over 5. The only way you finagle out of that is if you, like, for example, have had a directorship position by some chance at a company, or you take on really complicated cases, and this is kind of a big deal, who networks for you? And who do you know that will network for you? You think it doesn't make a difference, but it does. So for example, if you worked with a certain person in a certain line, or, you know, have skills that are unique, then you're going to get advocated for. So I'll take myself as an example. Very few people work internationally. Very few. That is an extremely marketable skill I have. That I can completely fluently speak 2 languages and work in 2 languages and program in 2 languages. And I knew Catalyst forwards, backwards, in the middle, around, about. I know the people who work at Catalyst, and I'm very well skilled in like even creating templates for Catalyst, how to figure out how many trials a therapist is running on Catalyst. So that program for me is backwards and forwards. So that is a very marketable skill on my end, right? Also my disposition that I'm willing to drive, I'm willing to take on cases that are a little bit more complex, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that makes you a different type of analyst than like, hey, I want to work 10 miles from my house, because we've seen this too. I bet you money, I'm going to put Amanda on here. I want to work 10 miles from my house from 9 to 2, and that's all the only cases I'll take. Because basically that makes you unmarketable to me, undesirable to me as a company owner. But I will never own a company. This is a conversation Maria and I have like all the time. My parents own the supermarket. I have no desire to ever have a clinic or have my own company. Because you're a slave to it. You are. Like, that is your life. And unless it is your life, you're not going to be successful. Period. I've never seen people who have a business and don't tend to their business. So that's kind of like the pros and cons. And then the salary range, I've seen a lot of people start at 50. So, I mean, this is back when Amanda and I started, and Amanda started even way before me. I don't think 50 would be a flying rate anymore. I think the base would be 60 or 65, but I have seen companies offer 50 and then all the way up to maybe 90. But I would say middle grounds of what I tend to see most is 70. Like, and that's
you do that as an employee or as a 1099? As
an employee. You make $70,000 a year. Okay, that's the middle range. I'm just giving you guys a middle range based on, like, I asked a couple of I have no qualms about it. So I'm like, how much do you make? So I've asked a couple of people in different places. So that's kind of based on the average of what my colleagues in Connecticut. I have a colleague in Texas, Florida, like up in Orlando. And then most of the people who work in South Florida tend to 1099, the ones I've colleagued with. And then my other friend owns a company. So I asked her, what does she pay her BCBA's employee rates? And she says around 70. So she owns a company up in Palm Beach. And so it's somewhere near there. Now, on average, how much do 1099s bill? Because this is like a question I randomly asked. generally somewhere between, okay, pre-corona life, I don't know after corona life, so don't ask me about corona life. Pre-corona life, somewhere around the 25-hour range is what people would tend to make as a 1099. And let's say you make 60, because that's in the middle, dollars an hour. That means per week you'd make $1,500 a week. Per month, if I multiply that 4.33,
It's 6.
around 6. Yeah, a little bit over $6,000 a month. So 6 times 12, 72,000. Okay. Obviously, if you work more, and that's working every single week a year, right? I'm just giving you an example. Which nobody who's a 1099 works. Well, if you do, you're gonna get burned out working 52 weeks a year. Okay. All right.
That was at 25 hours.
That was around 25 billable hours. Now you have your high performers and your low performers. That's why you see that extremity, right? Who's an example of that? Like Katie. Katie works like an animal, like a horse. Like, I mean, amazing. Like, she's a woman, is a workhorse. She will bill like 40 hours a week. I have no idea. And actually work them, right? Because there's people who will bill 40 hours a week and they're not working them. And God help you. I hope you get what's coming to you, because that's fraud. It's like immoral, unethical, and illegal. But if you're actually working 8 hours a day, which is a very taxing day billably as an analyst, because you're generally driving to 2 or 3 houses, you're staying hours on end with people. On top of that, you have to calculate for non-billable work. But you have people who just have the capacity to work like that. God bless them. Like, she's one of them. That she can bill easily 40 hours a week, you're going to make substantially a lot more money because you're a high earner. Or let's say you have someone who's coming back from maternity leave. They're not going to bill 40 hours a week. And that's okay. They don't have to, right? They want to be more with their baby than they are like working. And maybe they just have a caseload of 3 or 4 people. And so they'll bill 20 hours a week or 15 hours a week, whatever works for them. So I like that there's flexibility in that. So depending on what your situation in life is. Okay. Any questions? Now comes the nice fun part.
Well, going off on you said yourself more marketable, do you have like those limits? Do you find a niche to like make yourself more marketable in a different area? I feel like my schedule is limited because I do have a child, and right, but I still want to work as much, but
Oh, you're coming in now. Is that just me?
Oh no.
No,
It's me.
Okay. Yvette, hold on. Try to say that again, because you're coming a little bit in and out.
No, I was just saying, okay, maybe just 1 second. Maybe change my connection. Hold up. Is it working now?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly.
Okay. Well, just because I know right now I'm flexible, but I don't intend to be as flexible as my career goes, right? Because I do have a child and he's going to go to school, and eventually I want to limit the amount of time that I am flexible. So should I make myself more marketable in like finding a niche?
You could make yourself marketable in a niche, but then I'm a big fan of like Ken Coleman's book, The Proximity Principle, and that, right? Like, you're going to make yourself marketable in a niche by kind of being around the people who are in that niche, like working for free for people in that niche, like understanding, going to every CEU and reading every book and every article about that niche. However, I feel like having a couple of different specialties is really helpful. So everyone does have kind of their niche. Like, there's people who like to work with early learners or adults, but I feel like you should have the flexibility and the understanding of how to kind of do both, or kind of work here, work there, or in clinic or in home. Like, you know what I mean? Like, broaden your skills, because that's only going to make you a more marketable BCBA. So you can find a niche. I think that's really great. Like, there's people who do that all the time. Or, I mean, now there's people who like are really into like dissemination and having like a blog or a YouTube channel. That's kind of they're trying to do it that way, and like get advertisers and stuff. I don't know. I'm not about that world, but I mean, like, that's their niche. Then there's people who just want to do like very specialized clinical work or state work. And that's their niche. However, then you're kind of, it's a good and a bad rule, because then you're a victim of your own niche, right? So that's why I always kind of advocate that you kind of put your toe into different waters or your eggs in different baskets, just in case. Because you also don't even know if you're going to move. I've had people move across the world that I know of, right? But it's a very marketable skill around the world. Promise you that. Very, very marketable skill around the world. I'm curious how telehealth, COVID, and time is going to change that. I'm very curious, and I don't think we know the answer to that yet. So I think we will see kind of how ABA starts transforming and changing in the next 2 or 3 years, based on kind of what has happened. But I would make it my business to be a sponge, especially as a junior analyst, in every single way, and not if it's in your capacity and in your capability, say yes to every single learning opportunity and every single case, because you're not going to get it right. But the problem is, if you don't start and try and then look for colleagues, network, holy moly, network with people who work with you and don't work with you, who you think you will never work with, and then all of a sudden you like will bump into and you need them. And go up to people and then look for a mentor. That's a really big thing. Like, look for a senior analyst who like kind of has a trajectory path that you like, and just ask them, hey, can you be my mentor? Like, and then do things with them and understand. And that is, I feel like, the job you have as a junior analyst. That's how you get to be a senior analyst, on top of ensuring you don't burn out. Because that, I think, is the biggest risk, jumping into one phase and the other. And you don't burn out the first year. You start burning out around year 4 and 5. Because this is a very taxing job. Very, very taxing. Because you're dealing with people's livelihoods. And like the thing that they find the most precious on earth, which most of the time is their children or themselves. So if you don't make time to really kind of know what gives you balance, learn to say no, learn to say yes when you should, how to understand kind of the evolvement of cases. So every case you first take on is going to require an extreme amount of work. Anytime you have a new case, it's an extreme amount of work. But once you kind of get people in your system, like my friend that was behind me today, it's like, great, like we run on a system. And then there's certain times of years that like we have more work than others, but it's not like the same as getting to know a brand new client. Oh, never. Never, 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 never. Because you already know the family. You know kind of what they know. They get evolved and skilled over time. You get better at writing treatment plans. You get better at networking. You get better at saying no. You kind of get better, like they understand you, you understand them. Lots of different things. I would say the transition seasons tend to be really difficult. So going to school, ending school is a really big one. Whenever you're working with any kind of learner between 5 and 22. Hitting puberty is a hard season. Second, third, and fourth grade, for some sort of weird reason, is also a hard season. I don't understand. 8th grade, because it coincides with puberty. Transition into adulthood is a very stressful period for many people. Having worked with that end of the spectrum. A newly diagnosed learner is an extremely taxing and hard season. Because this mom used an analogy that I absolutely adored on Friday, and I wish Leslie was here. She said, when your kid first gets diagnosed, you're like with a machine gun. You're like, what do I gotta do? Like, okay, like I gotta give him this. Okay, I'll do that. I'll do this. I'll do that. I'll do this. I'll do that. And you kind of sort of lose your head. And then you have to settle into the reality of what it is. And then I had a therapist who I will adore the rest of my life. She's also a mom of a kid on the spectrum. She told me, you have to learn to accept 2 things. Your child has autism and that it's forever. And number 2, it's a lot harder than number 1. Yeah. Nowadays. Before it used to be number 1 is hard, not number 2. For my international families, they don't even understand what number 1 is to get to number 2. So I kind of have to buffer in their network with different people, and I try to have them see different people in different stages of life so they can understand. I'm like, look, all autism really is a different way of learning, or how like Tony Atwood puts it, right? You're more fascinated by other things than socializing. That's really what it is, and it's core. But it's just a way of learning and seeing the world differently. right? It comes with its symptomology, its strengths and weaknesses, but like anything does, right? So I would love for neurotypical people to have the moral rectitude and like the high morality that people with autism have. And they do. Their arrow morally points straight, like really, really straight. But that's a deficiency neurotypical people have. So you see what I mean? I think everything comes with its strengths and weaknesses. But when you have an early learner, you have to guide them through the machine gun phase to like put the machine gun down. We're going to have to, this is a chisel. That's how you're going to take this down. You can't beat the marble, you have to chisel. And when you learn to chisel, then you have to understand this is enduring, lifelong, hard work, but that little by little by little by little, we're going to get somewhere. And not to lose faith in me, in the process, right? I always tell people, I'm not Jesus or Mary Poppins. I don't have a magic umbrella, like, and I do not walk on water. So do not expect me to do one of those two things for your child. Like, I'm like, I can't make your child talk. I just can't. I know all of the research and evidence and how to practice and implement to increase communication, but that might look different than what you think it looks like, right? And no, Rain Man is not every child. Please don't ask me that again. So those are the three things I have to say. So, Yvette, that was a really good question. Anybody else have a good question? Or a silly question? Or I want to know, is it worth the money?
There you go.
You good? Cool. Does that give you guys better clarity whether kind of what lane you want to choose when you start? Yeah, okay. So that's all I just want to do is provide clarity in terms of, do you feel more leaning towards one way or the other, and that you make an educated and informed decision for what's right for you and your family at the time that you're going to go into a new position. The other big thing I feel like people look for when they're first starting is structure. They really want to structure an organized company because they need a lot of mentorship in the beginning. I think you need mentorship the entire way, but whatever. You really, 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 really cannot do without it in the beginning. So that's what I've tended to see why a lot of people will move to clinical as they first graduate. Because working at home is a little bit, not a little bit, it's a lot more unstructured. And so you have to get really good at managing your time. You have to understand that you plan out your schedule every Sunday and you confirm with everyone, and kid number 1 gets sick. Then kid number 2 needs spot from kid number 1. Oh my God, the teacher calls you. I really need to be there when kid number 3. How do I switch 3 and 1 and 2? So you need to be very, very apt, whether you are salary or if you're 1099, how to be flexible. And I mean flexible in the day, flexible in the time. I'm getting up and working on Saturdays right now. Not generally my cup of tea. This is not an easy day to work on the week. And I was so thankful. A lot of you joined me on the call for the family to do the parent training. And a lot of it kind of went right above their head. But it's okay. I'm going to kind of space it out with time. I wanted to see, one of my therapists is very completely fluent in English. She wants to observe a session or 2. So if anybody has a family who's willing to allow her to just observe, she's going to do a younger learner versus she used to have an older learner. If you're willing to hop on or the family is able to supervise, let me know. I'm going to try to have them look over kind of a session I'm going to run in a supervision. What else? If you're wanting to join any other parent training, Maria Leslie will do a very good job at translating. Don't worry. I admire you. You came on the call, man. Like, she was a trooper. So she did that so well. Now speaking a little Spanish, and I try to generally start with an ABC data. I had done that with one family, not with the other, but in order to kind of share and compatibilize the rate, I started with functions. But even still, they're not really getting it. And you're going to see that that's okay, right? I'm not going to cure everything in one parent training. It's going to take 4 parent trainings for me to get to function really thoroughly.
For them to get it, the function?
At least.
I really like the way that you structured it, like providing those examples and the scenarios and things like that. It's going to take them at least 4.
Yeah. I would say I actually just worked the first couple of parent trainings, and this is the backside you guys didn't get to see is I do it here in person as well, but especially when you're doing teletherapy, I worked a lot on environmental manipulations and structuring your schedule. I was like, you don't need to pay me for this. This is just something I need to tell you. Like, and it's going to make my session a lot easier, and it's going to make your life a lot easier. So you would be very surprised when you have early learners, how unstructured people tend to be with their schedules. I mean, they have an idea, right? They're like, oh, they kind of play, then they sleep around this time, and they eat around this time. But I'm like, no, what are you going to do at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12? And then I give them that sort of structure in order to set up therapy. When you're coordinating care with this SLP or an OT, never, ever assume people have the environmental capacity in their home or in a clinic that you think they do. I mean, every house I go into, and it's funny, has nothing to do with income. It's like a vomit of Toys R Us. I have no idea why people buy so many toys. Like, I really don't get it. Like, I would love to walk into a house that has like 4 toys. The only place I've ever seen that maybe a little bit was in Europe. That people have like books, puzzles, and Legos. Like everybody else, but in the States, it's like, I have a swing, I have this, I have that. And then like, if you're getting like overwhelmed visually, imagine for the child. So I had to teach the first family how to even just exit what is age appropriate toys, what are not age appropriate toys. Why is, and then I have to say the most controversial, horrible thing. Why does your child have an iPad? They are 2 years old. They do not need an iPad.
You know what? I believe like that, like I kind of know like why you see everywhere, I see a lot of toys. I believe that's why of parents, because there is still kind of guilty.
Yeah.
And they try to make them feel better in the way they can. So what they can do, they just go and buy a bunch of toys and just throw it to the kid, like, be happy. So that's what kids like. That's a lot of toys. And I believe that's the same. And I feel like a lot of parents, like my mom, she does it too. She buys a lot of stuff too. And my mom, relax. But that's the way she feel, I'm buying it for her. I'm buying like for my kid. So that's the way it makes her feel less guilty.
Yeah. And that's part of kind of something you have to learn to understand. Just listen, right? Be a really good listener the first few sessions. I did not have the chance to record the initial interview because I want you guys to see an initial assessment. I didn't even get to an assessment portion on Saturday with the second family. I literally only got to an interview. And it was like, what is your schedule? What are some things that you see? With this little one, she was born albino. So there are genetic traits that I have to deal with, visual impairments I have to deal with. She doesn't want to wear her glasses. She also loves to be a free spirit and not wear shoes all the time, which is hard because she's a very pronounced toe walker and her calves are like beautiful. But like, that's a problem. So kind of understanding, hey, you can get Converse, you can get Tim's. Those are problems we don't even have to fix. Like, just get a set of Tim's. And then they're like, what are Tim's? I'm like, I can show you here are Timberlands. But things like that, like, hey, your kid is not getting enough. And then now with COVID, also being understanding and patient, like, hey, I get it. We're all trying to survive. Like, there's no judgment. And there's no judgment on my end that you gave your kid an iPad, because that's what everyone else you see doing. I was at a restaurant and literally only one table out of the 6 tables that had kids had someone without an iPad. That'll just give you but that's where we are in humanity. But I always tell them, under 5, there's no purpose, research-wise, that your child should ever have a device. It does them more harm than good. And there's tons of studies to do it. And it's weird because most of the time, people know it, right? That's the weird thing. I thought that, I had some cases that people didn't know. But when I sit down, I'm like, now if your kid's 10, I'm like, we're on a different page. But if they're 5, like 2, 3, I'm like, take it out now, because then you don't have to build like dependency issues that I'm then working on for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And kind of not, think about it. When you're in that world, you're not in our world. Just, you're not. But then learning to advocate in this season too for them not being online 7-8 hours a day, because this Zoom learning isn't good for them either.
So you know what? So my brother-in-law, he broke the computer. Today,
frustration.
right, search for a computer, it's impossible. Everywhere sold out.
They're all sold out. Yeah.
Even one grand computer, they just sold out. Everything.
Yeah.
But it's
Apple, you can get on a waiting list and you can get them in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
but it is very difficult to get a computer right now because, chairs, right? Like I have a bunch of chairs in the back of my car because nobody can find chairs or tables or office desks or computers. But do you guys have any other questions about kind of pros and cons? What did you like? Your experience? Anything? Okay. Oh, something interesting in the PBS did initially is they built in an OBM scale for BCBAs as a starting point. So we had a sliding scale for pay. I don't know how this will continue or not continue with Cultivate. Don't ask me. That's not above my pay grade. But it used to be if you worked more, you got paid a higher rate. You worked less, you got paid a lower rate. That is a very OBM thing. So you will also see some OBM kind of, hopefully, because right, we should practice what we preach. You should see some OBM strategies implemented. Team Foria is a huge OBM thing, right? Like rewarding, providing constructive praise for like your staff. Some people don't like when I do Team Foria for them, so I have therapists like that. So I just privately write them like, "Thank you." That's really nice. But I get that, right? Like I don't always want to be like, but I'm like, hey, it's money for you, so I'll put it on anyway. But yeah, so there's lots of different OBM strategies you should hopefully use in a company. And then be very mindful where you move. So, I mean, part of the reason I love working at this company is that it's very reputable. I know that no one's committing fraud. We're committed to having, when I was being interviewed, I interviewed PBS too. Because I'm like, oh no, I'd go work myself anywhere else. Like, I know what I'm worth. I want to work in a company that has low turnover rate. I want to work at a company that I can grow. I want to work at a company that is doing things ethically. That's a big problem in our field. Very, very, very large problem. I want to work for somewhere where I can make good colleagues, have a team. Like, it's not just sometimes about money. Because if you go chasing money, that's how people went to jail. Honestly.
It's true.
But it's true. Like Medicaid got into a ton of fraud because of that. And that's why it's so peculiar to work with Medicaid. Medicaid has a lot of different issues I'll talk about another day. But part of it is they made it too easy for people to commit fraud. You just did. Now it's a different story, but before, I had people who were billing like 30 hours a day. There's not even 30 hours in a day. So I'm like, how did you even, like, that doesn't seem weird to anybody, but there's so many people on the system that it didn't account for all these inconsistencies.
Well, the thing is, it worked for years. It's not even months in, like, it's been working for years.
Yep. Yeah.
They called it impossible days, and they counted how many providers did.
Yeah, like, right? And then, you know how bad it got? That at FABA, like, the entire crowd, when they were doing, like, a billing chat, they were like, yeah, our friends from South Florida. Because 75% of the fraud came from South Florida. So if you were someone from South Florida, our 3 counties, we were all like doing this because we were so embarrassed from like people from Tampa or whatever that, they weren't doing that stuff. It was really here. So also kind of working for a company culture you'd be happy to promote, right? That wants to see you grow. Like, I love the fact that like our company wants to see us grow as individuals just as much as like as employees and analysts. Because I always tell families, like, I'm a human before I'm an analyst. Like, I'm a person. And I always want to see you as a person before I see you even as my client. Because the day you lose your humanity is the day that this just becomes a job to you. And you do a pretty bad job. Cool. All right, friends. So next weekend is Labor Day weekend. So I wanted to ask, actually, I'm going to stop the recording now.